Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so when you picture ancient Buddhist monastic communities, what do you see? Probably a group of perfectly serene individuals, right? Sitting in silent meditation, completely detached from the messy, everyday drama of the world. Well, it turns out the reality was far more vibrant, incredibly flawed, and honestly, deeply human. Today, we're taking a look at a highly detailed ancient legal text called the Ten Recitations Vinaya. And let me tell you, this text totally shatters those serene illusions. It gives us a remarkably practical and sometimes shockingly relatable look at the everyday lives of early monks. Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the real Sangha behind precepts, then move on to attachments and baselines of property. After that, lies and privileges and famines, followed by speech boundaries within the Sangha, and we'll wrap up with revering nature and all spirits.
Part 1. The real Sangha behind precepts.
To really get this text, we have to realize that these ancient monks weren't always just sitting around in perfect peace. Nope. They argued, they hoarded stuff, and they complained. A lot. The strict rules we read about today didn't just fall out of the sky. They were explicitly written because human beings were constantly making mistakes and acting out. There's actually this brilliant case law formula that repeats throughout the entire Vinaya. It works exactly like this. First, a monk, or maybe a group of monks, misbehaves in some very specific way. Second, the rest of the community or the local laypeople get super annoyed and complain about it. Third, the Buddha calls a gathering, brings the offending monk forward, and basically interrogates them. Did you really do this? When they confess, step 4 happens. A specific precept or rule is born to prevent that exact behavior from ever happening again. So literally every single rule is a direct reaction to a real-life human error. Which brings us to Section 2, Attachments and Baselines of Property. So you might be surprised to learn that for ancient monks, who were literally supposed to have given up all worldly possessions, their biggest attachment was often clothing. I know, right? The text gives us this highly entertaining look at a clique known as the Six Group monks. These guys essentially treated their monastic robes like a runway fashion show. They were constantly changing. They had an outfit for entering the village, a completely different one for eating, one for the day, one for the night, one for going to the toilet, and yet another one just for taking a bath. Because of this, they hoarded massive amounts of excess clothing, leaving giant piles of laundry everywhere just to rot. Or worse, they forced older, devout monks to clean up their mess and fold their clothes, completely distracting the whole community from actually reading scriptures and meditating. So the crucial point is, the Buddha absolutely had to step in and put a stop to this hoarding. He established a strict baseline for property. The new rule? A monk could only keep an extra robe for a maximum of 10 days. If you kept it past that 10th day, boom, it was an offense and the extra robe had to be forfeited. But wait, what happens if you receive an incomplete piece of fabric and you actually need more time to finish making the robe? Well, the text outlines this with extreme, almost exhausting legal specificity. It counts down every single day. If you receive fabric, you get 10 days to assemble it. If you're waiting for matching fabric from a relative or a sponsor, okay, you get an extension. The text literally outlines the legal scenario for day 11, day 12, day 13, all the way up to exactly 30 days. 1 month is the absolute limit. This incredible attention to detail really shows us just how seriously they took the management of resources. They had to prevent greed from creeping right back into the monastery. Moving on to Section 3, Lies and Privileges in Famines. Let's see how this shifts from everyday greed to a much darker reality, which is survival. The text sets this dramatic scene during a severe famine in the region of Vaisali. After the summer retreat, 2 groups of monks reunited. Now, the monks who had stayed in Vaisali during the famine arrived starving, weak, and physically emaciated. But the monks who had stayed near the Vagumata River, they arrived fat, energetic, completely well-fed, and with great complexions. So I want you to guess, why did one group thrive in a deadly famine while the rest starved? Did they find some secret food source? Well, here is the shocking truth. The Vagumata River monks hadn't found a secret crop. No, they found a loophole in human psychology. They had gone to the wealthy laypeople in their village and brazenly bragged about having profound spiritual powers. They'd point to each other and claim, oh, this monk is an arhat, an enlightened being. And this one? He's reached the 4th jhana of deep meditation. This one over here has limitless compassion. By claiming these superhuman spiritual states, they convinced the terrified, starving villagers that feeding these highly holy monks would yield massive karmic rewards. And it worked.
They secured premium food for themselves, while everyday families and other monks literally starved.
When the Buddha found out about this, he was absolutely unsparing in his criticism. He stepped right in and ruled that bragging about superhuman spiritual states to unordained people simply to gain privileges results in a pachitiya offense. So what is a pachitiya? It's an act of expiation. Basically, it's a monastic offense that requires formal confession to the entire community to avoid creating severe karmic and spiritual obstacles. The message was clear. Spiritual achievements were absolutely not to be weaponized as a marketing tool for food.
Section 4. Speech boundaries within the Sangha.
You know, living in a tight-knit community inevitably leads to interpersonal drama, and the Vinaya spends a massive amount of time outlining speech boundaries just to prevent toxic environments. If you thought petty office politics was a modern invention, this ancient text absolutely proves otherwise. It details some surprisingly petty squabbles among these ancient ascetics. Monks would get into arguments and immediately run to unadorned laypeople to expose the other monks' sins, just to ruin their reputation. Others would try to preemptively hand out community property and food only to their personal friends and favorites. And the best part, when they were called out in disciplinary hearings, some monks would weaponize silence. They'd use evasive silent treatments to completely stonewall the community process. And this brilliantly illustrates our point. Let me introduce you to Channa. Channa was basically the resident rebellious monk in the text. Whenever the community recited the rules to keep everyone in check, Channa would openly disparage them. He'd say, "What's the use of these minor rules? It just makes monks experience doubt, regret, and depression." He was actively trying to undermine the legal structure designed to keep the peace. And, predictably, the Buddha had to create specific rules explicitly forbidding monks from disparaging the code of conduct and from using evasive silence to frustrate disciplinary action.
So we've seen how the rules regulated clothing, prevented exploiting laypeople for food, and curbed toxic office politics. Which leads us to a fascinating question. Did the Buddha's rules only protect human society? Were these ancient laws exclusively human-centric?
That takes us to Section 5, Revering Nature and All Spirits.
The answer to that question is a resounding no. The Vinaya expands its compassion far beyond the walls of the monastery, showing a deep, deep reverence for nature and all spirits. The text tells this incredibly evocative anecdote about a monk who wanted to build himself a large house. To do this, he clear-cut a massive pipala tree. But you have to understand, in the worldview of this ancient text, a tree isn't just timber. It's a home. By chopping it down, the monk completely destroyed the home of a tree spirit and her family. And this displaced spirit actually visits the Buddha in the dead of winter to lodge a formal complaint against the monk. Listen to the tree spirit's heartbreaking plea to the Buddha. She asks, "I am homeless, I have many young children, and the winter wind is freezing. Where do I safely put my children?" This is just an extraordinary moment in the text. It treats non-human, natural entities with deep empathy, and most importantly, with legal standing. The environment itself is literally given a voice to complain about the destructive expansion of humans. Now, what's really interesting here is how the Buddha responded. He agreed with the spirit. He declared the monks' actions entirely unlawful and laid down strict rules explicitly forbidding monks from destroying plant life. He equated plants and trees to ghost villages, basically the homes and municipalities of spirits, insects, and animals. He explicitly categorized 5 protected plant seeds that absolutely cannot be destroyed: root seeds, stem seeds, joint seeds, fallen seeds, and real seeds. A monk could face an official offense just for burning, breaking, or cutting these down. It's a remarkably ancient, deeply spiritual form of environmental protection. So, what should you take away from this explainer? It's that the 10 recitations Vinaya isn't just some dry, dusty list of restrictions. It is a living, breathing record of a highly flawed, deeply human community. Behind every strict rule about robes, food, arguments, and trees, there is a deeply human story of trial, error, and growth. They were a community striving, step by step, mistake by mistake, to achieve a beautiful ideal of harmony. Which leaves us with this final thought to reflect on. If an ancient spiritual community, composed of people who literally dedicated their entire lives to peace, still needed hundreds of explicit, intensely specific rules just to live in harmony with each other and the environment, how many unspoken rules of harmony are we breaking in our own modern communities today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.